The Future of Sustainable Urban Planning. Table of Content. Introduction. Chapter 1. Introduction to Urban Planning in the 21st Century. Chapter 2. The Challenges of Modern Urbanization. Chapter 3. Principles of Sustainable Urban Planning. Chapter 4. Energy and Climate Strategies. Chapter 5. Green Infrastructure and Nature in Cities. Chapter 6. Transportation and Mobility of the Future. Chapter 7. Smart Cities and Technology. Chapter 8. Housing and Social Equity. Chapter 9. Urban Resilience and Disaster Preparedness. Chapter 10. Circular Economies and Local Systems. Chapter 11. Global Perspectives on Sustainable Urban Planning. Chapter 12. Cultural and Behavioral Dimensions of Sustainability. Chapter 13. Governance and Policy Frameworks. Chapter 14. Future Visions of Sustainable Cities. Chapter 15. Conclusion and Pathways Forward. Introduction. The world is in the midst of an unprecedented transformation. For the first time in history, more people live in cities than in rural areas. By 2050, nearly 7 out of 10 people will call an urban area home. This massive demographic shift places cities at the very center of the global sustainability challenge. They are engines of opportunity and innovation, but also sites of inequality, environmental stress, and climate vulnerability. As the climate crisis accelerates, the stakes of urban planning have never been higher. The choices made in city design, infrastructure, housing, and governance will determine not only the quality of urban life, but the health of the planet itself. Will future cities deepen existing problems of sprawl, congestion, and carbon dependency, or will they emerge as models of resilience, equity, and regeneration? This book, The Future of Sustainable Urban Planning, explores this critical question. It examines the principles, practices, and possibilities shaping the next generation of cities. Moving from historical context to contemporary challenges, from cutting-edge innovations to speculative futures, it offers a comprehensive guide to understanding how urban environments can transition toward sustainability. At its heart, this book makes 3 central arguments. Sustainability is multidimensional. It is not only about reducing emissions or protecting green spaces, but also about creating equitable, inclusive, and livable communities. Cities are systems. Transport, housing, energy, water, and culture are deeply interconnected. Effective planning requires holistic thinking that bridges disciplines and sectors. The future is open. While the challenges are immense, there is no single blueprint for sustainable urbanism. Instead, multiple pathways exist, shaped by local cultures, governance systems, and collective choices. Each chapter of the book tackles a different facet of urban sustainability. The early chapters establish the historical and conceptual foundations of urban planning, tracing how industrial growth, modernist ideals, and globalization shape today's urban landscapes. From there, the discussion turns to pressing challenges: climate change, resource depletion, social inequities, and rapid urbanization. Subsequent chapters explore emerging solutions: renewable energy integration, green infrastructure, sustainable mobility, circular economies, smart technologies, and participatory governance. Case studies from around the world illustrate how different regions are experimenting with sustainability, from Copenhagen's carbon neutrality plan to Medellin's social urbanism and Singapore's water-sensitive design. Finally, the book looks forward, imagining possible urban futures: net zero, regenerative, resilient, or post-growth, and considering the cultural, behavioral, and ethical dimensions of urban life in the decades to come. The aim is not only to inform, but also to inspire. The task of building sustainable cities belongs to all of us: policymakers, planners, business leaders, community organizers, and everyday citizens. It is a collective project, requiring imagination as much as expertise, solidarity as much as innovation. The pages ahead invite readers to reflect, question, and envision. They ask us to see cities not as fixed artifacts, but as living, evolving systems that can be steered toward sustainability if we act with foresight and determination. The future of sustainable urban planning is still being written. This book is one contribution to that unfolding story. Chapter 1: Introduction to Urban Planning in the 21st Century. 1.1 The Evolution of Urban Planning. Urban planning is as old as civilization itself. From the gridded streets of ancient Mesopotamia to the carefully designed aqueduct systems of Rome, humanity has long sought to organize space in ways that promote survival, efficiency, and social cohesion. In the Middle Ages, cities grew around castles, ports, and trade routes, often organically and without much foresight. By the time of the Industrial Revolution, rapid urbanization brought both opportunity and crisis: overcrowded tenements, pollution, disease, and social inequities. It was during the late 19th and early 20th centuries that urban planning began to emerge as a professional field. Visionaries such as Ebenezer Howard, who pioneered the Garden City movement, and Le Corbusier, who envisioned modernist cities of efficiency and order, set the stage for urban planning as both science and art. Yet these early experiments were far from perfect. Many ignored social equity or ecological consequences. Today, urban planning is undergoing a profound transformation. No longer is the goal merely to organize land use or accommodate industry. Rather, the focus has shifted to building sustainable, resilient, and inclusive cities that can withstand the challenges of climate change, economic shocks, and social diversity. 1.2 The Urban Century. The 21st century is often described as the urban century. For the first time in human history, more than half of the world's population lives in cities, and by 2050, that number is expected to rise to nearly 70%. Megacities such as Lagos, Sao Paulo, and Mumbai are expanding at unprecedented rates, while smaller cities are also experiencing rapid growth. This urban shift is not uniform. In some regions, cities are shrinking due to population decline and economic stagnation. In others, informal settlements or slums grow faster than formal infrastructure, creating vast inequities. The reality of the 21st century is that cities are both engines of innovation and hotspots of vulnerability. Cities generate more than 80% of global GDP, but they also consume over 2/3 of the world's energy and produce about 70% of global carbon dioxide emissions. The way we design, manage, and inhabit cities in the coming decades will determine not only the fate of urban dwellers, but of the planet itself. 1.3 Why Sustainability Matters. Sustainability in urban planning is not a luxury, it is a necessity. Climate change, resource depletion, biodiversity loss, and increasing inequality make business-as-usual planning models obsolete. Traditional approaches, focused primarily on efficiency and economic growth, often overlook long-term ecological and social consequences. A sustainable city is one that balances three interdependent pillars: environmental sustainability, reducing carbon emissions, preserving ecosystems, and minimizing waste; economic sustainability, creating stable, resilient economies that provide jobs without exhausting resources; social sustainability, ensuring inclusivity, equity, and a high quality of life for all residents. This integrated approach is now the standard for forward-looking urban planning. Cities are no longer judged solely by their skylines or GDP, but by how livable, resilient, and just they are. 1.4 The shift from industrial to post-carbon cities. Industrial cities of the 19th and 20th centuries were built around factories, railways, and ports. They prioritized productivity, often at the cost of air quality, water safety, and social cohesion. Zoning laws separated functions, residential, industrial, commercial, to reduce conflicts, but this often led to long commutes, car dependency, and social fragmentation. The cities of the 21st century must be post-carbon cities: compact, walkable, digitally connected, and powered by renewable energy. Instead of designing cities around cars, planners are rethinking urban layouts around people and public space. Instead of endless urban sprawl, the focus is shifting to densification, mixed-use neighborhoods, and transit-oriented development. This shift is not merely technological, it is cultural and political. It requires governments, businesses, and citizens to reimagine what a city can be, not just a place to work and consume, but a community that fosters creativity, health, and belonging. 1.5 The ethical dimension of urban planning. Urban planning has always been deeply political. Decisions about land use, zoning, transportation, and housing determine who benefits from a city and who is excluded. In many cases, urban planning has reinforced inequality, whether through redlining in the United States, forced relocations in colonial contexts, or exclusionary zoning worldwide. The future of sustainable urban planning must address this ethical dimension. It is not enough for a city to be green if it displaces vulnerable populations, or smart if it leaves marginalized groups without access to technology. True sustainability requires that all residents, regardless of income, race, gender, or nationality, have the right to the city. The concept of the right to the city, first articulated by French philosopher Henri Lefebvre, has become central to modern urban thought. It emphasizes participation, inclusivity, and justice in urban development. Sustainable urban planning in the 21st century must be guided by these values if it is to succeed. 1.6 Setting the stage. As we enter the coming decades, urban planning is at a crossroads. One path leads to unsustainable expansion, congested, polluted, inequitable cities vulnerable to disasters. The other leads to resilient, inclusive, and sustainable cities, hubs of innovation, culture, and ecological harmony. The choice is not easy, nor is it purely technical. It involves governance, finance, culture, and values. This book explores the challenges, strategies, and possibilities for shaping the urban future. The chapters ahead will dive into the specific domains, energy, mobility, housing, governance, and technology, that together define the future of sustainable urban planning. But first, it is crucial to understand the historical trajectory and the current moment, a world that is more urban, more interconnected, and more fragile than ever before. The stakes could not be higher. The city of the future is not a distant dream. It is being built piece by piece, decision by decision today. Chapter 2. The Challenges of Modern Urbanization. 2.1 Rapid population growth and the rise of megacities. The world is urbanizing at a breathtaking pace. Every week, nearly 1.5 million people move to cities. By 2030, the planet will host more than 40 megacities, urban regions with over 10 million inhabitants. Cities like Lagos, Dhaka, and Jakarta are expanding at speeds that outpace infrastructure, governance, and resources. This growth brings opportunities for innovation, creativity, and economic dynamism, but it also generates immense pressure on land, housing, public services, and natural systems. Unchecked expansion risks creating fragile megacities plagued by congestion, pollution, and social division. The challenge is not simply the number of people, but the quality of urban growth. Are cities growing in ways that are equitable, sustainable, and resilient, or are they reproducing patterns of sprawl, segregation, and resource overconsumption? 2.2 Urban sprawl and land use pressures. One of the most pressing problems is urban sprawl, the low-density, car-dependent expansion of cities into rural and natural areas. While sprawl may offer affordable land and housing, it consumes vast amounts of energy, increases commuting times, and destroys ecosystems. Cities like Los Angeles, Mexico City, and Beijing exemplify this pattern, where miles of highways and suburbs stretch outward, fragmenting landscapes and creating heavy reliance on fossil fuels. This sprawl also undermines agricultural productivity and food security by paving over fertile land. Reversing this trend requires smart growth strategies, densification, mixed-use zoning, and transit-oriented development. Without such measures, sprawl will continue to erode both environmental sustainability and quality of life. 2.3 Housing crises and inequality. Urban growth has not translated into universal access to decent housing. Across the globe, cities face acute housing crises. In wealthy nations, real estate speculation drives prices beyond the reach of ordinary citizens. In poorer regions, the issue is not just affordability, but availability, leading to the explosive rise of informal settlements, often lacking clean water, sanitation, or secure tenure. The United Nations estimates that nearly 1 billion people live in slums, a number projected to rise as urbanization accelerates. These communities are often located in hazardous areas, floodplains, steep hillsides, or polluted zones, making them especially vulnerable to disasters. Housing inequality fuels social unrest, displaces low-income communities, and undermines the promise of inclusive cities. Addressing this requires bold policies, rent control, public housing, cooperative models, and financial reforms that treat housing as a human right rather than a commodity. 2.4 Climate change and environmental stress. Perhaps the most defining challenge of urbanization is climate change. Cities are simultaneously major contributors to greenhouse gas emissions and frontline victims of its impacts. Heat waves threaten urban populations with health risks, especially the elderly and poor. Sea level rise endangers coastal megacities like Miami, Dhaka, and Manila. Extreme storms strain infrastructure, causing blackouts, flooding, and economic paralysis. Air pollution, often exacerbated by urban industries and transport, leads to millions of premature deaths annually. Environmental degradation extends beyond climate change. Cities deplete freshwater reserves, generate mountains of waste, and push biodiversity to the brink. Urban resilience in the 21st century requires cities to drastically reduce emissions while adapting to inevitable climate impacts. 2.5 Infrastructure deficits and aging systems. Urban life depends on infrastructure, roads, bridges, water systems, power grids, and communication networks. Yet much of the world faces an infrastructure crisis. In rapidly growing cities, infrastructure expansion cannot keep pace with demand, leaving residents with traffic jams, electricity shortages, and inadequate sanitation. In older cities, infrastructure built in the 20th century is aging and deteriorating, requiring massive reinvestment. The American Society of Civil Engineers, for example, routinely gives the United States infrastructure a low grade, citing collapsing bridges, leaking water pipes, and outdated transit systems. Similarly, many cities in developing countries struggle to extend even basic services to new residents. The future of urban resilience depends on reimagining infrastructure. Modular, renewable, adaptive, and digitally integrated systems that serve both present and future generations. 2.6 Social fragmentation and inequality. Urbanization intensifies inequality. Cities are often celebrated as places of opportunity, but they are also landscapes of exclusion. Wealthy neighborhoods exist side by side with marginalized communities, creating stark contrasts in education, health, and security. In many cities, gentrification is pushing working-class residents out of central neighborhoods, replacing them with luxury developments. This creates not only spatial segregation, but also cultural erasure. Informal workers, migrants, and minority groups often face systemic exclusion from decision-making and basic services. If unaddressed, this social fragmentation threatens urban stability. Cities cannot be sustainable if they are unjust. The future of urban planning must tackle inequality not as a side issue, but as a central design principle. 2.7 Governance and political challenges. Managing cities is inherently complex. Urban governance involves multiple actors: local governments, national agencies, private developers, and citizens, often with conflicting interests. Corruption, bureaucratic inefficiency, and lack of transparency exacerbate these challenges. In some cases, local governments lack the financial autonomy to implement sustainable initiatives, relying heavily on national or international funding. In others, citizen participation is minimal, leading to top-down decisions that fail to reflect community needs. Urban governance in the 21st century must be more inclusive, participatory, and transparent. Without political reform, even the best urban plans risk remaining paper exercises. 2.8. The global dimension of urban challenges. Finally, it is important to recognize that urban challenges are not isolated. Cities are deeply interconnected through trade, migration, finance, and climate. A supply chain disruption in one part of the world can ripple across urban economies globally. Similarly, greenhouse gas emissions from one megacity affect climate patterns worldwide. Urbanization is a global phenomenon, and solutions must also be global. Networks of cities, such as C40 cities or ICLEI, demonstrate the growing importance of international cooperation among urban regions. The challenges of modern urbanization are planetary in scale, requiring both local innovation and global solidarity. 2.9 Conclusion. Modern urbanization is a paradox. It brings progress, connectivity, and innovation, yet it also produces inequality, environmental stress, and vulnerability. The challenges outlined in this chapter, population growth, sprawl, housing crises, climate change, infrastructure deficits, inequality, governance, and global interdependence, form the backdrop against which the future of sustainable urban planning must be understood. The task of the 21st century is not to stop urbanization, but to reshape it. Cities are here to stay. The question is whether they will evolve into engines of resilience and justice, or descend into sites of crisis and fragmentation. The following chapter turns to the principles of sustainable urban planning, outlining the frameworks and values that can guide cities through these immense challenges toward a more sustainable future. Chapter 3. Principles of Sustainable Urban Planning. 3.1. Defining sustainability in the urban context. The word sustainability has become commonplace, but in the context of cities, its meaning is both specific and urgent. A sustainable city is not just one with parks and solar panels. It is a city that can thrive without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. Urban sustainability integrates the environmental, economic, and social dimensions of development. It means reducing ecological footprints, building resilient economies, and ensuring equity for all residents. It also requires flexibility, the ability to adapt to changing conditions such as climate shifts, technological innovations, or demographic transitions. Unlike past planning models, which often prioritized efficiency or growth, sustainability emphasizes long-term balance between people, place, and planet. 3.2. The three pillars of sustainable planning. 1. Environmental sustainability. Reducing greenhouse gas emissions through energy efficiency, clean transport, and renewable energy. Protecting ecosystems and biodiversity by integrating nature into cities. Designing for resilience against climate risks such as floods, droughts, and heat waves. 2. Economic sustainability. Building diverse, resilient economies that are not overly dependent on a single industry. Encouraging green industries and circular economies that minimize waste. Ensuring cities remain affordable and accessible for businesses and workers alike. 3. Social sustainability. Promoting equity and inclusion in housing, education, and employment. Ensuring participatory governance where communities help shape urban futures. Designing public spaces that foster cultural exchange, safety, and belonging. These three pillars are interdependent. A city with cutting-edge green technology but rampant inequality is not sustainable, nor is one with economic prosperity but environmental degradation. True sustainability requires balance across all three dimensions. 3.3. The 15-minute city model. One of the most influential concepts in modern sustainable planning is the 15-minute city, popularized by urbanist Carlos Moreno. The idea is simple yet revolutionary. Residents should be able to access their daily needs, work, school, healthcare, shops, leisure, within a 15-minute walk or bike ride from their homes. This model reduces car dependency, cuts emissions, strengthens local economies, and fosters vibrant communities. Cities like Paris, Portland, and Melbourne have begun experimenting with this approach, reimagining neighborhoods as complete communities rather than dormitories for distant jobs. The 15-minute city exemplifies the shift toward human-centered planning, where quality of life, not just economic output, becomes the measure of success. 3.4 Compact, mixed-use, and transit-oriented development. The opposite of sprawl is compact development, denser cities with mixed-use neighborhoods where housing, commerce, and services coexist. Compact cities make public transit viable, reduce infrastructure costs, and preserve natural land at the urban edge. Transit-oriented development, TOD, is a related principle, designing neighborhoods around high-quality public transport nodes. This reduces reliance on cars, lowers emissions, and increases accessibility. Successful TOD combines affordable housing, commercial activity, and public space around transit hubs, creating vibrant and sustainable communities. 3.5 Resilience and adaptability. Cities must be designed not only for efficiency, but also for uncertainty. Climate change, pandemics, migration waves, and economic shocks require cities that can adapt and recover. Key resilience strategies include flexible infrastructure that can serve multiple functions, e.g., parks that double as flood retention basins. Redundancy in energy, water, and transport systems to avoid catastrophic failures. Community preparedness through inclusive planning and disaster risk education. Resilience shifts the mindset from preventing all crises to absorbing, adapting, and thriving despite them. 3.6 Human-centered design and livability. A sustainable city is one that puts people at the center. Too often, cities have been designed around cars, industries, or abstract economic goals. Human-centered design restores the city as a place for living, not just working and consuming. Principles of livability include walkable streets with safe sidewalks, bike lanes, and public transport. Public spaces that encourage social interaction and cultural expression. Access to green areas that improve mental and physical health. Affordable and diverse housing options for all demographics. Livability ensures that sustainability is not just an ecological or economic metric, but a lived experience of comfort, dignity, and opportunity. 3.7 Participation and the right to the city. Sustainability is not only about technical solutions, but also about democracy and justice. The principle of the right to the city demands that all residents, regardless of status, have the ability to shape the urban environment. Participatory planning can take many forms. Public consultations and forums. Digital platforms for crowdsourced ideas. Community-driven design of local projects. Participation ensures that sustainability is not imposed from above, but co-created, reflecting diverse needs and values. It also builds trust and social cohesion, both essential for resilience. 3.8 Circular economy in urban systems. Traditional urban economies follow a linear model: take, make, dispose. A sustainable city embraces the circular economy, where resources are reused, recycled, and regenerated. Examples include waste-to-energy systems that convert trash into power, water recycling, and rainwater harvesting, sharing economies that reduce consumption through communal use of goods. Circular principles reduce environmental impacts while creating new economic opportunities. Cities like Amsterdam are pioneering circular economy strategies at the metropolitan scale. 3.9 Cultural identity and placemaking. Sustainable urban planning is not just technical, it is also cultural. Cities must preserve and celebrate their unique identities rather than becoming homogeneous, globalized spaces. Placemaking, the design of spaces that reflect local history, culture, and community, strengthens belonging and resilience. A sustainable city embraces diversity, architectural, cultural, and social. It honors heritage while innovating for the future. Without this dimension, sustainability risks becoming sterile and disconnected from human meaning. 3.10 Conclusion. The principles of sustainable urban planning are not abstract ideals, but practical guides for shaping the cities of the future. Environmental stewardship, economic resilience, and social justice must work in tandem. Compactness, resilience, human-centered design, circular economies, and cultural identity provide concrete frameworks for translating sustainability into reality. Yet principles alone are not enough. They must be put into practice through policies, designs, and investments. The next chapters explore how these principles are applied in specific domains: energy, infrastructure, mobility, housing, and governance. The future of cities depends on how faithfully and creatively we can turn these principles into lived realities. Chapter 4: Energy and Climate Strategies. 4.1 The Energy Urbanization Nexus. Cities are the engines of global energy demand. They consume over 2/3 of the world's total energy and produce nearly 70% of global carbon dioxide emissions. From heating and cooling buildings to powering transport and industries, urban energy use shapes the trajectory of climate change. For sustainable urban planning, the challenge is twofold. Decarbonization, transitioning from fossil fuels to renewable, low-carbon energy systems. Efficiency and conservation, reducing total demand through smarter design, technology, and behavior. Without radical energy transformation, no city can claim to be truly sustainable. 4.2 Renewable energy in urban systems. The shift to renewables is at the heart of sustainable energy strategies. Cities have multiple pathways to integrate clean power. Solar power, rooftop photovoltaics, solar canopies over parking lots, and community solar farms. Wind power, offshore wind near coastal cities or vertical axis turbines in dense urban areas. Geothermal energy, district heating systems powered by geothermal wells, particularly effective in volcanic regions. Biogas and waste-to-energy, capturing methane from landfills or sewage plants to produce electricity. Pioneering cities such as San Diego, Copenhagen, and Reykjavik are demonstrating how urban areas can transition toward 100% renewable electricity. 4.3 Distributed energy and microgrids. Traditional energy systems rely on centralized power plants and vast transmission networks. But cities are increasingly turning to distributed energy systems, where power is generated locally and managed through microgrids. Microgrids enhance resilience by keeping essential services, hospitals, schools, water facilities running during blackouts. They also integrate renewable energy more effectively and can be community-owned, empowering citizens to control their energy future. Examples include Brooklyn's blockchain-based energy trading microgrid and Freiburg's community solar cooperatives in Germany. 4.4 Energy efficiency in buildings. Buildings account for nearly 40% of global energy consumption. Improving efficiency in construction and operation is therefore critical to sustainability. Strategies include passive design, maximizing natural light, ventilation, and insulation to reduce energy needs. Smart buildings, using sensors and automation to optimize heating, cooling, and lighting. Retrofitting existing buildings, upgrading insulation, windows, and systems to reduce waste. Net zero buildings, structures that produce as much energy as they consume, often through integrated renewables. Cities like Vancouver and Singapore have implemented strict green building codes that drive innovation while cutting emissions. 4.5 Climate mitigation strategies. Beyond energy, cities must implement broad climate mitigation measures. These include carbon pricing and emissions trading schemes to incentivize low-carbon development. Electrification of transport with renewable-powered vehicles. Urban design that reduces car dependency, such as compact development and transit-oriented planning. Green supply chains, encouraging industries and businesses to cut embedded carbon in goods and services. Mitigation requires systemic change. Cities must not only clean their own emissions, but also influence consumption patterns and global supply chains. 4.6 Climate adaptation in cities. Even with aggressive mitigation, climate change impacts are inevitable. Cities must therefore pursue adaptation strategies to protect people, infrastructure, and ecosystems. Examples include heat adaptation, planting urban forests, installing cool roofs, and creating shaded public spaces. Flood resilience, building seawalls, restoring wetlands, and designing sponge cities that absorb excess water. Storm management, underground reservoirs, permeable pavements, and improved drainage systems. Water security, desalination, rainwater harvesting, and aquifer recharge. Cities like Rotterdam, New York, and Singapore have become global leaders in climate adaptation through bold, innovative projects. 4.7 Nature-based climate solutions. An emerging strategy is the use of nature-based solutions, leveraging ecosystems to mitigate and adapt to climate risks. These include urban wetlands that filter water and reduce flooding, green roofs and walls that insulate buildings while cooling urban microclimates, reforestation and mangrove restoration near coasts. Nature-based solutions are often more cost-effective than engineered alternatives, while providing co-benefits such as biodiversity and recreational spaces. 4.8 Financing the transition. Energy and climate strategies require substantial investment. According to the International Energy Agency, cities will need trillions of dollars annually to meet decarbonization goals. Financing options include green bonds for sustainable infrastructure, public-private partnerships to leverage private capital, carbon finance through emissions trading and offset markets, international aid and climate funds for cities in the Global South. The challenge is ensuring that financing mechanisms are equitable and accessible, preventing wealthy cities from leaping ahead while poorer cities fall behind. 4.9 Governance and policy frameworks. Energy transitions and climate strategies cannot succeed without strong governance. Local governments must align with national policies while also collaborating with international networks. Effective governance requires clear targets and timelines, such as net zero pledges, accountability mechanisms, including emissions reporting, stakeholder inclusion, ensuring businesses, communities, and civil society are engaged. Global frameworks such as the Paris Agreement, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, and city networks like C40 Cities provide a roadmap for collective action. 4.10 Conclusion. Energy and climate strategies lie at the heart of sustainable urban planning. Without decarbonized, resilient energy systems, cities cannot hope to thrive in the 21st century. Renewable energy, distributed systems, efficiency, adaptation, and nature-based solutions form the toolkit of future-ready cities. Yet these strategies require more than technology. They demand political will, financial innovation, and social inclusion. The energy transition will succeed only if it is just, ensuring that benefits reach all communities and that no one is left behind. The next chapter will explore the role of green infrastructure and nature in cities, highlighting how ecosystems and design can transform urban life into something not only sustainable but regenerative. Chapter 5: Green Infrastructure and Nature in Cities. 5.1 Rethinking Cities as Ecosystems. For much of modern history, cities were designed in opposition to nature. Forests were cleared, rivers were channelized, and wetlands were drained to make way for development. But this approach has proven unsustainable. Cities that destroy their ecosystems ultimately undermine their own survival. A new paradigm is emerging: cities as ecosystems. Instead of seeing nature as an obstacle to development, planners now recognize it as infrastructure, providing services such as clean air, water filtration, temperature regulation, and biodiversity. This shift is central to the idea of green infrastructure. 5.2 Defining green infrastructure. Green infrastructure refers to networks of natural and semi-natural systems that deliver ecological, social, and economic benefits. Unlike traditional gray infrastructure, roads, pipes, concrete channels, green infrastructure works with natural processes. Examples include urban forests and street trees, wetlands and rain gardens for stormwater management, green roofs and walls, parks, trails, and ecological corridors. Green infrastructure is multifunctional. A park is not just recreational space, it can also filter air, capture carbon, manage floods, and foster social cohesion. 5.3 Urban forests and street trees. Trees are often called the lungs of the city, and for good reason. They sequester carbon, filter pollutants, and cool urban heat islands through shade and evapotranspiration. Studies show that neighborhoods with tree cover can be up to 5 to 10 degrees Celsius cooler than those without. Beyond environmental benefits, trees improve mental health, reduce stress, and even correlate with lower crime rates. Programs like Million Trees NYC and China's Sponge City initiative illustrate large-scale investments in urban forestry. However, urban forestry must be equitable. Too often, wealthier areas enjoy tree-lined streets, while marginalized communities endure concrete heat traps. Ensuring tree equity is now a priority for many cities. 5.4 Green roofs and vertical greening. As urban land becomes scarce, cities are turning to rooftops and building facades to reintroduce nature. Green roofs insulate buildings, reduce stormwater runoff, and create habitats for pollinators. Cities like Toronto and Copenhagen have mandated green roofs in new construction. Green walls and vertical gardens improve air quality and aesthetics while cooling buildings naturally. Singapore, known as a city in a garden, has pioneered vertical greenery on skyscrapers. These innovations demonstrate that ecological infrastructure can coexist with dense urban development. 5.5 Water-sensitive urban design. Water is both life-giving and destructive in cities. Traditional urban design often treats stormwater as waste to be removed via pipes and drains. But this leads to flooding, pollution, and ecological damage. Water-sensitive urban design, WSUD, integrates water cycles into planning. Strategies include permeable pavements that allow rainwater to infiltrate, bioswales and rain gardens that filter runoff, restored rivers and wetlands that absorb floods, rainwater harvesting for irrigation and domestic use. The Chinese Sponge City program is a leading example, redesigning cities to absorb and reuse 70% of rainfall. 5.6 Biodiversity and urban habitats. Urban expansion often destroys habitats, pushing species to the brink. Yet cities can also be havens for biodiversity if designed thoughtfully. Green corridors, wildlife bridges, and pollinator gardens can connect fragmented habitats and allow species to thrive. Cities like Berlin and London are experimenting with urban rewilding, reintroducing native species, and creating spaces where nature is allowed to flourish with minimal human intervention. Biodiverse cities are not only ecologically rich, but also more resilient to climate change and disease outbreaks. 5.7 Public health and well-being. Green infrastructure is not only about ecology, it is also about human health. Access to green spaces reduces stress, improves cardiovascular health, and supports child development. During the COVID-19 pandemic, parks and greenways became critical spaces for recreation and social connection. The World Health Organization recommends that every resident should live within 300 meters of green space. Achieving this requires deliberate planning, especially in dense and low-income neighborhoods. 5.8 Economic value of green infrastructure. Green infrastructure is often dismissed as a luxury, but it delivers significant economic value. Studies show that every dollar invested in urban trees can yield $2 to $5 in benefits through energy savings, stormwater management, and increase property values. Green spaces also attract tourism, boost retail activity, and enhance real estate markets. Far from being a cost, green infrastructure is an investment in long-term urban prosperity. 5.9 Governance and Equity Challenges. Despite its benefits, green infrastructure faces barriers. Competing land uses, limited budgets, and short-term political cycles often prioritize gray infrastructure over ecological solutions. In addition, green gentrification can occur when investments in parks and greenways drive up property values, displacing low-income residents. To avoid this, planners must embed equity into green infrastructure projects, ensuring affordability, community participation, and protection against displacement. 5.10 Conclusion. Green infrastructure reframes nature not as decoration, but as essential infrastructure. Urban forests, green roofs, wetlands, and biodiversity corridors provide resilience against climate change while improving health and livability. The challenge is not technological but political and cultural. Cities must value nature as much as concrete, and they must ensure equitable access to its benefits. The next chapter explores transportation and mobility of the future, examining how sustainable transit systems can further reduce emissions, enhance equity, and reshape the way people move through cities. Chapter 6: Transportation and Mobility of the Future. 6.1 Transportation as the backbone of cities. Transportation is the circulatory system of urban life. It connects people to jobs, goods to markets, and communities to each other. Yet transportation is also one of the largest contributors to climate change, responsible for nearly 25% of global carbon dioxide emissions, the majority from road vehicles. Traditional, car-centered models of mobility have created sprawling, congested, and polluted cities. The future of sustainable urban planning requires a fundamental shift toward clean, efficient, and inclusive mobility systems that prioritize people over cars. 6.2 The problems with car-centric cities. The 20th century was dominated by the automobile. Highways, parking lots, and suburban sprawl reshaped cities worldwide. But the hidden costs of car-centric design are staggering. Congestion, wasted time, and lost productivity. Air pollution, linked to millions of premature deaths annually. Greenhouse gas emissions, accelerating climate change. Public health impacts, rising obesity and sedentary lifestyles. Inequity, car ownership is expensive, excluding many from full participation in urban life. Sustainable cities must break free from this model and embrace multimodal, low-carbon mobility. 6.3 Public transit as a climate solution. Efficient, affordable, and extensive public transit is the cornerstone of sustainable mobility. Subways, buses, trams, and commuter rail reduce car dependency, lower emissions, and increase social inclusion. Key strategies for next-generation transit include Bus Rapid Transit (BRT) systems, pioneered in Curitiba and Bogotá, offering metro-level efficiency at lower cost. Electrification of transit fleets, such as Shenzhen's fully electric bus system. Integration of modes, with seamless transfers between buses, trains, and bicycles. Smart ticketing systems that reduce friction and increase accessibility. Investing in public transit is not just environmental policy, it is social policy, ensuring mobility rights for all. 6.4 Walking and cycling, active transportation. Walking and cycling are the most sustainable, healthy, and equitable modes of transport. Cities that prioritize active transportation reap multiple benefits: reduced emissions, improved health, lower infrastructure costs, and more vibrant street life. Strategies include pedestrianization of city centers, as seen in Barcelona's superblocks. Protected bike lanes, such as Copenhagen's extensive cycling network. Shared micromobility systems, bike sharing and e-scooters. Traffic calming through speed limits, curb extensions, and safer crossings. Active mobility is not just an alternative, it is essential for building human-centered cities. 6.5 The role of electric vehicles, EVs. While reducing car dependency is critical, cars will not disappear entirely. The rise of electric vehicles, EVs, offers a cleaner alternative to gasoline and diesel cars. EVs can drastically cut local air pollution and, when powered by renewables, significantly reduce emissions. However, EVs are not a silver bullet. They still require roads, parking, and resources such as lithium and cobalt for batteries. Thus, EVs must be part of a broader mobility strategy, not a replacement for investment in transit or active modes. 6.6 Autonomous Vehicles and Future Scenarios. Autonomous vehicles, AVs, are often portrayed as the future of mobility. Their potential benefits include fewer accidents, optimized traffic flows, and expanded accessibility for people unable to drive. Yet AVs could also worsen sprawl, congestion, and inequality if deployed without regulation. Shared autonomous fleets could support sustainable goals, but private AV ownership could replicate today's car-centric model. Urban planners must proactively shape AV adoption through policies that encourage shared, electric, and integrated systems. 6.7 Mobility as a Service, MaaS. A transformative idea in urban mobility is mobility as a service, MaaS, integrating all modes of transport into a single, user-friendly digital platform. Instead of owning a car, residents can plan, book, and pay for multimodal trips, bus, bike, car share, train through one app. MaaS emphasizes access over ownership, reducing the need for private vehicles while enhancing convenience. Helsinki has been a global leader, piloting MaaS through its WIM app, showing how digital solutions can support sustainable mobility. 6.8 Equity and Accessibility in Urban Mobility. A just transportation system must serve all residents, not just the wealthy or tech-savvy. Yet many mobility innovations risk deepening inequalities if they exclude low-income, elderly, or disabled populations. Equity principles in mobility include universal design for accessibility, ramps, elevators, tactile paving. Affordable fares and subsidies for vulnerable groups. Coverage in underserved areas, not just profitable corridors. Community participation in transit planning. Transportation justice ensures that mobility is a right, not a privilege. 6.9 Climate resilient mobility. Cities must also prepare mobility systems for climate change impacts. Floods can disable subway systems, heat waves can disrupt rail networks, and storms can damage roads and bridges. Strategies include elevated transport infrastructure in flood-prone regions, heat-resistant materials for rail lines and pavements, emergency evacuation networks integrated with transit, redundant and diversified transport modes for resilience. Mobility systems must be designed not only for efficiency, but also for durability under stress. 6.10 Conclusion. The future of urban transportation lies in moving away from car dominance toward a multimodal ecosystem. Efficient public transit, active walking and cycling networks, shared mobility, and clean vehicles integrated into resilient infrastructure. Transportation reform is about more than getting from A to B. It is about redefining the city itself, shaping urban form, reducing inequality, improving health, and mitigating climate change. The next chapter explores the role of smart cities and technology, analyzing how digital innovations can transform urban planning while raising new ethical and governance challenges. Chapter 7. Smart Cities and Technology. 7.1 Defining the Smart City. The term smart city refers to urban areas that use digital technologies, from sensors to artificial intelligence, to improve efficiency, sustainability, and quality of life. The idea is to harness data to make cities more responsive, adaptive, and efficient in managing resources, infrastructure, and services. But a smart city is not simply about gadgets and apps. At its core, it is about using technology to serve human needs, reducing congestion, cutting emissions, improving safety, and enabling citizen participation. 7.2 The Internet of Things, IoT in cities. The Internet of Things, IoT, connects everyday objects, streetlights, traffic signals, garbage bins, water meters, to networks that collect and transmit data. This allows cities to monitor air quality and pollution levels in real time, optimize traffic flows to reduce congestion, detect leaks in water systems before they cause major losses, manage waste collection more efficiently by tracking bin usage. Barcelona, for example, has deployed IoT-enabled streetlights that save energy by dimming when streets are empty. 7.3 Artificial Intelligence and Data Analytics. Artificial intelligence, AI, is increasingly central to urban management. AI can predict energy demand and balance renewable energy supply, optimize public transit schedules and routing, enhance emergency response by analyzing traffic and population flows, support predictive policing and public safety, though this raises ethical concerns. Data analytics helps cities move from reactive to predictive governance, anticipating problems before they escalate. 7.4 Smart Mobility Systems. Technology is revolutionizing mobility through innovations such as autonomous vehicles, already piloted in cities like Phoenix and Singapore. Shared mobility platforms, Uber, Lyft, Grab, that expand on-demand services. Real-time transit apps that provide live updates on buses and trains. Dynamic congestion pricing, where tolls rise and fall based on traffic conditions. While these tools can reduce emissions and congestion, they must be integrated with public transit and sustainability goals to avoid reinforcing car dependency. 7.5 Smart Energy and Grids. Energy systems are becoming smart through digital monitoring, automation, and integration of renewables. Smart grids allow two-way communication between utilities and consumers, integration of rooftop solar, wind, and other distributed energy, demand response systems that adjust consumption during peak hours. This creates more resilient and efficient cities, reducing both costs and carbon footprints. 7.6 Digital twins and urban simulation. One of the most promising tools for urban planners is the digital twin, a virtual model of a city that mirrors its physical reality. Digital twins can simulate traffic, flooding, or energy demand under different scenarios, helping planners test policies before implementation. Singapore's Virtual Singapore project is a leading example, offering a 3D digital twin of the entire city to guide planning, disaster response, and environmental management. 7.7 Citizen participation in the digital age. Technology can empower citizens by expanding access to decision-making. Apps and online platforms allow residents to report potholes, broken lights, or waste issues directly to city services. Participate in online consultations and budget allocation, participatory budgeting. Access open data portals to hold governments accountable. Tallinn, Estonia, has pioneered digital governance, offering residents e-voting and e-services that increase efficiency and trust. 7.8 Ethical and governance challenges. Smart cities also raise serious ethical concerns. Privacy. Surveillance cameras and sensors can track personal movements. Data security. Cyber attacks could disable critical infrastructure. Digital divide. Not all residents have equal access to digital tools, risking exclusion. Corporate control. Private companies managing city data may prioritize profit over public good. Toronto's failed Sidewalk Labs project illustrates these risks. Citizens rejected a Google-led smart city initiative over fears of data exploitation. Smart cities must be democratic cities, ensuring transparency, accountability, and citizen ownership of data. 7.9 Technology as a tool, not a goal. It is crucial to remember that technology is a means, not an end. A city that installs sensors but ignores inequality or ecological collapse is not truly smart. The most successful smart city strategies integrate technology with broader sustainability goals, reducing emissions, enhancing equity, and improving quality of life. Without this alignment, technology risks becoming a distraction rather than a solution. 7.10 Conclusion. Smart cities represent one of the most exciting frontiers in urban planning. Digital tools, IoT, AI, digital twins, smart grids can make cities more efficient, resilient, and inclusive. Yet they also pose risks of surveillance, inequality, and corporate overreach. The challenge for the 21st century is to ensure that smartness serves sustainability and democracy. Technology must amplify human agency, not replace it. The next chapter will shift from the digital to the social, examining housing and social equity as a foundation for truly sustainable urban futures. Chapter 8: Housing and Social Equity. 8.1 Housing as a Human Right. Housing is more than shelter. It is the foundation of dignity, health, and opportunity. Yet around the world, millions live in inadequate housing, informal settlements, or face displacement due to rising costs. The United Nations recognizes housing as a fundamental human right, but achieving this goal requires deliberate planning and policy. Sustainability is not only about green buildings or energy efficiency. It must also ensure affordable, secure, and equitable housing for all residents. Without this, urban planning risks creating environmentally efficient cities that are socially unjust. 8.2 The Global Housing Crisis. Urbanization has intensified housing challenges. Affordability. In many cities, housing costs rise far faster than wages. Informal settlements. Nearly 1 billion people worldwide live in slums or informal housing lacking services. Homelessness. A visible crisis in wealthier cities, reflecting deep inequities. Gentrification. Redevelopment often displaces low-income residents. Sustainable urban planning must address these structural problems, not just the physical design of buildings. 8.3 Affordable Housing Strategies. Solutions for affordable housing vary by context but often include inclusionary zoning, requiring developers to set aside a portion of new units for low and middle-income households. Public housing investment, as seen in Vienna's globally admired model. Community land trusts, CLTs, where land is owned collectively to prevent speculation. Rent control and tenant protections, which stabilize housing markets. Affordability is not just a financial issue, but a planning issue, requiring coordination between land use, transit, and infrastructure. 8.4 Housing and Sustainability Standards. New housing must also meet environmental goals. Energy-efficient homes reduce utility costs and emissions, while durable construction lowers long-term maintenance. Features include passive design for natural ventilation and lighting, solar panels, green roofs, and efficient insulation. Access to sustainable transport, reducing car dependence. Programs like LEED, BREEAM, and the Passive House Standard show how housing can meet both social and environmental goals. 8.5 Addressing informal settlements. In many rapidly growing cities of the Global South, informal settlements are the dominant form of housing. Evictions or forced relocations are often harmful and unjust. Instead, planners are shifting toward upgrading in place, providing services like water, sanitation, and electricity while respecting community networks. Examples include Brazil's Favela Barro program, which integrated favelas into the formal city. India's Slum Rehabilitation Authority, which provides incentives for upgrading housing. Recognizing and investing in informal communities is key to inclusive urban development. 8.6 Preventing green gentrification. Sustainability initiatives can sometimes unintentionally fuel displacement. New parks, transit lines, or eco-districts often raise property values, pushing out the very residents they were meant to benefit, a process known as green gentrification. To prevent this, cities can pair green projects with affordable housing protections, support rent stabilization in areas undergoing sustainability upgrades, Involve communities directly in project design and decision-making. Environmental justice requires that green benefits do not come at the cost of displacement. 8.7 Housing cooperatives and shared models. Innovative housing models challenge the dominance of speculative markets. Cooperatives and co-housing communities emphasize collective ownership, shared resources, and affordability. These models often foster stronger social ties and reduce environmental impact through shared amenities and smaller ecological footprints. Examples include co-housing projects in Denmark and Germany, which combine sustainability with community life. 8.8 Intersectionality in housing policy. Housing inequity intersects with race, gender, age, and disability. For example, minority communities often face redlining and segregation legacies. Women-headed households are disproportionately vulnerable to eviction. The elderly and disabled require universal design features like ramps and accessible bathrooms. Sustainable housing must be intersectional, addressing the diverse needs of all urban residents. 8.9 Housing, health, and well-being. The link between housing and health is well established. Poor housing can lead to respiratory illnesses, mental stress, and higher mortality. Conversely, stable and affordable housing improves mental health, educational outcomes, and economic opportunity. Housing policy is therefore not only about shelter, but also about public health and human development. 8.10 Conclusion. A sustainable city cannot exist without housing justice. Equitable housing policies ensure that green, resilient, and livable urban environments are accessible to all, not just the wealthy. The next chapter explores how urban resilience and disaster preparedness are shaping the future of planning, ensuring that cities can withstand shocks while protecting their most vulnerable populations. Chapter 9. Urban Resilience and Disaster Preparedness. 9.1. The Age of Urban Vulnerability. Cities are increasingly on the front lines of crises. Climate change intensifies heat waves, storms, floods, and sea level rise. Global pandemics, cyber attacks, and political unrest further expose the fragility of urban systems. Resilience has become a defining principle of urban planning, the ability of cities to withstand, adapt, and recover from disruptions while maintaining essential functions. Unlike sustainability, which focuses on long-term balance, resilience emphasizes short-term adaptability under stress. 9.2 What is urban resilience? Urban resilience refers to the capacity of cities to anticipate, absorb, and recover from shocks and stresses without compromising future development. It encompasses physical resilience, robust infrastructure that withstands hazards. Social resilience, communities with strong networks and adaptive capacity. Economic resilience, diverse economies that can absorb disruptions. Institutional resilience, governance systems that coordinate effectively in crises. Resilience is holistic, linking physical systems with social and institutional strength. 9.3 Climate risks in cities. Cities concentrate people, assets, and infrastructure, making them especially vulnerable to climate change. Flooding. Coastal cities like Jakarta and Miami face existential threats from rising seas. Heat waves. Urban heat islands amplify risks, especially for the elderly and poor. Storms and hurricanes. Infrastructure damage can paralyze urban systems. Water scarcity. Cities like Cape Town and Chennai have already experienced day zero drought scenarios. Building resilience requires both mitigation, reducing emissions, and adaptation, adjusting to unavoidable impacts. 9.4 Disaster resilient infrastructure. Resilient infrastructure is essential for minimizing disaster impacts. Strategies include flood defenses such as seawalls, levees, and tidal barriers. Green infrastructure, wetlands, mangroves, rain gardens that absorb floods. Heat-resilient design with reflective roofs, shaded streets, and cooling centers. Distributed energy systems like microgrids that maintain power during blackouts. Tokyo's massive underground flood tunnels and Rotterdam's multifunctional flood plazas are pioneering examples. 9.5. Social resilience and community preparedness. Infrastructure alone cannot guarantee resilience. Social networks, trust, and local knowledge often determine survival during crises. Communities with strong mutual aid systems, neighborhood organizations, and inclusive planning are better able to cope. For instance, during the 2011 earthquake and tsunami in Japan, communities with strong social cohesion experienced faster recovery. Building resilience, therefore, means investing in community empowerment and participation. 9.6. Public health and pandemic preparedness. The COVID-19 pandemic revealed the vulnerability of cities to health crises. Urban density can accelerate contagion, but it can also support effective health systems when properly managed. Lessons for resilient cities include investing in robust public health infrastructure, designing flexible spaces, stadiums, schools that can be repurposed during emergencies, protecting essential workers and vulnerable populations, using digital tools for real-time monitoring and contact tracing with safeguards for privacy. Pandemics highlight that resilience must be multidimensional, addressing biological as well as environmental hazards. 9.7. Economic resilience. Cities thrive on economic dynamism, but shocks from financial crises to supply chain disruptions can destabilize them. Economic resilience strategies include diversifying industries to reduce dependence on a single sector, supporting local businesses and circular economies, building adaptive labor markets with social protections, investing in digital infrastructure to enable remote work and continuity. Resilient economies prioritize both stability and adaptability. 9.8. Governance and institutional capacity. Resilience requires governance systems capable of coordinating across agencies and scales. Key principles include integrated planning that considers housing, transport, health, and environment together. Multi-level coordination between local, regional, and national governments. Scenario planning and stress testing of policies. Transparency and communication with the public to build trust. Programs like the 100 Resilient Cities Initiative, launched by the Rockefeller Foundation, have helped cities develop resilience strategies with dedicated chief resilience officers. 9.9. Equity in resilience planning. Disasters are not equalizers. They often hit marginalized groups hardest. Low-income neighborhoods are more likely to be in floodplains, lack insurance, and have weaker infrastructure. Resilience planning must therefore be equity-centered, ensuring inclusive evacuation and recovery plans, targeted investment in vulnerable communities, community-led decision-making, affordable housing protections to prevent post-disaster displacement. Without equity, resilience can deepen inequalities rather than reduce them. 9.10. Conclusion. Resilient cities are not those without shocks, but those that can adapt, recover, and emerge stronger. True resilience requires combining physical infrastructure with strong communities, equitable policies, and adaptive governance. The next chapter turns to the economic dimension of sustainability, exploring how circular economies and local systems can transform urban prosperity while reducing environmental impacts. Chapter 10. Circular economies and local systems. 10.1. Beyond the linear economy. The dominant global economic model has long been linear. Extract right-pointing arrow, produce right-pointing arrow, consume right-pointing arrow, discard. Cities embody this system, consuming vast amounts of resources while generating mountains of waste and emissions. This model is unsustainable in a world of finite resources. The circular economy offers an alternative. It seeks to design waste out of the system, keep materials in use for as long as possible, and regenerate natural systems. In a circular city, products are reused, buildings are retrofitted, and food and water cycles are closed. 10.2 Principles of the Circular Economy. The circular economy rests on three key principles. Design out waste and pollution by rethinking products, buildings, and systems. Key products and materials in use through repair, reuse, and recycling. Regenerate natural systems, restoring ecosystems rather than depleting them. This approach is not only ecological, but also economic, unlocking new business models and reducing costs. 10.3 Circular Cities in Practice. Cities are increasingly adopting circular strategies. Amsterdam aims to be fully circular by 2050, with pilots in construction waste recycling and circular food systems. San Francisco has achieved over 80% waste diversion through comprehensive recycling and composting. Tokyo has pioneered resource recovery, reusing construction materials, and promoting product longevity. These cities demonstrate that circular practices can scale when supported by policy, innovation, and citizen participation. 10.4 Circular Construction and the Built Environment. Construction is one of the most resource-intensive industries, generating nearly 40% of global carbon dioxide emissions. Circular strategies include designing buildings for disassembly and reuse, using modular construction to adapt buildings over time, recycling demolition materials into new projects, prioritizing low-carbon materials such as timber, bamboo, and recycled steel. Adaptive reuse of existing structures is often more sustainable than building new, preserving cultural heritage while reducing emissions. 10.5 Circular Food Systems. Food waste is a major urban challenge. Nearly one-third of food globally is wasted. Circular food systems emphasize reducing waste through better logistics and redistribution, composting organic waste for urban agriculture, encouraging local production through rooftop farms, community gardens, and vertical farming, supporting short supply chains that reduce transport emissions. Cities like Milan have established food waste hubs that redirect surplus food to charities, tackling both hunger and waste. 10.6 Energy Circularity and Resource Efficiency. Circular principles extend to energy and resource flows. District heating and cooling systems that reuse waste heat. Industrial symbiosis, where one company's waste becomes another's input. Water reuse and recycling through decentralized treatment. Urban mining of electronic waste and old infrastructure for valuable materials. These practices reduce dependency on virgin resources and make cities more resilient to supply shocks. 10.7 Local economies and short supply chains. Circularity is closely linked to localization. Globalized supply chains are efficient but fragile, as shown by disruptions during the COVID-19 pandemic. Strengthening local economies improves resilience and reduces emissions. Strategies include supporting local manufacturing and repair industries, encouraging community energy cooperatives, building regional food networks, promoting local currencies or exchange systems to keep value within communities. Localization reduces vulnerability while fostering stronger community ties. 10.8 Business models for circularity. The private sector plays a vital role in enabling circular cities. Emerging business models include product as a service, where companies lease products instead of selling them, incentivizing durability. Sharing platforms from car sharing to tool libraries. Repair and refurbishment businesses, extending product lifespans. Reverse logistics, enabling companies to reclaim and recycle products. Circular businesses align profitability with sustainability, shifting incentives away from waste. 10.9 Governance and policy tools. Governments can accelerate the transition by setting zero-waste targets and extended producer responsibility laws, creating economic incentives for reuse and recycling, Supporting innovation hubs and incubators for circular businesses. Educating citizens about consumption and repair culture. The EU's Circular Economy Action Plan is a global leader, embedding circularity into industrial and urban policy. 10.10 Conclusion. Circular economies and local systems represent a profound shift in how cities operate. By moving away from take-make waste toward regeneration and reuse, cities can drastically cut emissions, conserve resources, and enhance resilience. The next chapter turns to a broader horizon, global perspectives on sustainable urban planning, comparing approaches across different regions and cultures. Chapter 11. Global Perspectives on Sustainable Urban Planning. 11.1. The Need for Global Approaches. Sustainable urban planning is a universal challenge, but solutions vary across contexts. Wealthy industrialized nations often focus on retrofitting existing infrastructure and reducing carbon footprints, while rapidly urbanizing regions prioritize basic services and housing. Cultural traditions, governance models, and economic structures shape how sustainability is pursued. Understanding these global differences allows cities to learn from one another while avoiding one-size-fits-all solutions. 11.2 Europe. Compact cities and green policies. European cities are often cited as leaders in sustainable urbanism. Key features include dense compact urban forms that support walking, cycling, and public transit. Aggressive climate policies, such as the EU's Green Deal and carbon-neutral city initiatives. Circular economy adoption, with Amsterdam, Copenhagen, and Helsinki at the forefront. Participatory planning traditions, giving citizens strong roles in decision-making. Examples. Copenhagen aims to be the world's first carbon-neutral capital by 2025. Barcelona has pioneered superblocks, reducing car traffic and reclaiming public space. 11.3 North America. Innovation amid sprawl. North American cities face challenges of sprawl and car dependence, but innovation is emerging. Transit-oriented development, TOD, in cities like Portland and Vancouver. Green building leadership through LEED and other certifications. Resilience planning, especially in coastal cities like New York and Miami. Community-led sustainability movements, from eco-districts to urban farming. Yet inequality and housing crises remain major obstacles, highlighting the need to integrate social equity with green policies. 11.4 Latin America. Social urbanism and inclusivity. Latin American cities often grapple with informality, inequality, and rapid growth. Their innovations emphasize equity and integration. Medellin, Colombia, transformed through cable cars and escalators connecting hillside communities to the city center. Curitiba, Brazil, pioneered bus rapid transit (BRT), now a global model. Participatory budgeting in Porto Alegre, Brazil, empowered citizens to allocate municipal funds. These approaches show how sustainability must also mean social justice in contexts of inequality. 11.5 Africa. Urbanization and informality. Africa is the world's fastest urbanizing continent. Challenges include infrastructure deficits, informal settlements, and limited resources. Yet opportunities abound. Informal economies provide livelihoods and resilience. Solar energy initiatives are leapfrogging traditional grids. Compact, low-cost housing models are being tested in cities like Kigali and Nairobi. Green infrastructure, wetlands, urban forests offers cost-effective resilience. African urbanism highlights the importance of context-specific solutions rooted in local cultures and economies. 11.6 Asia. Megacities and innovation. Asia is home to the world's largest cities and boldest urban experiments. Key trends include China's Sponge Cities program for water-sensitive urban design. Singapore's Smart City leadership, integrating greenery and technology. Japan's disaster-resilient planning, from earthquake-resistant buildings to advanced transit. India's Smart Cities mission, focusing on technology-enabled infrastructure. Asia demonstrates both the risks of rapid urban growth, pollution, congestion, and the potential for large-scale innovation. 11.7 Middle East, sustainability in harsh environments. Middle Eastern cities face extreme climates and dependence on fossil fuels. Responses include Masdar City in the UAE, a planned eco-city powered by renewables. Doha and Riyadh, investing in mass transit and green building codes. Water-sensitive design critical for arid regions, with investments in desalination and wastewater reuse. The region illustrates both the possibilities and contradictions of sustainability in resource-intensive economies. 11.8 Global South versus Global North. While the Global North often emphasizes carbon reduction and technological innovation, the Global South prioritizes basic services, informality, and affordability. Yet these challenges also generate creativity, from informal recycling systems in Lagos to community gardens in Mexico City. Bridging this divide requires recognizing that sustainability is not a uniform path, but a plurality of models reflecting local realities. 11.9 International cooperation and knowledge sharing. Global challenges demand global cooperation. Networks like C40 Cities Climate Leadership Group, megacities collaborating on climate action. ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability, supporting local climate strategies. UN Habitat, guiding sustainable urbanization globally. These platforms enable cities to share lessons, avoid mistakes, and amplify their impact. 11.10 Conclusion. Sustainable urban planning is a global endeavor, but it must be locally grounded. Europe shows the value of compact design. Latin America highlights social equity. Asia demonstrates scale and technology, and Africa showcases resilience amid resource constraints. The next chapter turns to the cultural and behavioral dimensions of sustainability, exploring how values, lifestyles, and social norms shape the cities of the future. Chapter 12. Cultural and behavioral dimensions of sustainability. 12.1 Beyond infrastructure, the human factor. Cities can build green infrastructure, smart grids, and transit systems, but if residents do not adopt sustainable lifestyles, these investments may fall short. Culture and behavior are therefore central to sustainability. Urban planning must not only provide infrastructure but also shape norms, values, and practices that encourage sustainable living. 12.2 Culture as a driver of urban sustainability. Cultural traditions shape how communities interact with the environment. For example, Japanese practices of minimalism and efficiency inform compact housing and low-waste lifestyles. Indigenous communities often prioritize stewardship of land and water, offering models of ecological balance. European cafe and plaza cultures reinforce walkable, social urbanism. Respecting and leveraging cultural values helps cities adopt sustainability in ways that feel authentic and enduring. 12.3 Behavior change and everyday practices. Many sustainability challenges depend on individual choices, energy use, transport, diet, and waste. Cities can influence behavior through nudges, such as defaulting electricity plans to renewable sources. Incentives, like discounts for cycling or penalties for excess waste. Education campaigns, raising awareness about climate and health benefits. Social norms, where visible practices, e.g. widespread recycling, encourage adoption by others. Behavioral science shows that small changes at scale can have major impacts. 12.4 Sustainable lifestyles and consumption. Overconsumption drives urban ecological footprints. Promoting sustainable lifestyles requires reducing materialism and embracing sufficiency. Strategies include encouraging plant-based diets to lower emissions, promoting sharing economies, tool libraries, car sharing, co-housing, supporting local, ethical, and circular businesses, designing cities where low-consumption lifestyles are convenient and attractive. Sustainability should not be framed as sacrifice, but as a pathway to healthier, more meaningful living. 12.5 Public spaces and social interaction. Public spaces shape culture and behavior. Parks, plazas, and community centers foster social cohesion and shared responsibility for the urban environment. By contrast, privatized car-dominated spaces isolate individuals and undermine collective identity. Cities that design inclusive, vibrant public spaces cultivate cultures of care, cooperation, and environmental stewardship. 12.6 Education and generational shifts. Schools, universities, and community organizations play a critical role in building a culture of sustainability. Young people in particular are leading global movements, from Fridays for Future to local climate justice campaigns. Generational shifts in values toward climate action, minimalism, and equity are reshaping consumer markets, politics, and urban policy. Education and youth empowerment ensure sustainability becomes embedded across lifetimes. 12.7 Art, media, and storytelling. Culture is transmitted through art, media, and storytelling. Films, literature, and visual arts influence how societies imagine the future of cities. Positive visions of green, just cities inspire action, while dystopian narratives warn of inaction. Public art, eco-festivals, and community storytelling can strengthen collective identity and motivation toward sustainability. 12.8 Diversity, inclusion, and equity. Cultural and behavioral dimensions must also reflect diversity. Marginalized groups often bear the brunt of environmental harm, but are excluded from sustainability planning. Inclusive cities recognize the voices of women, minorities, indigenous peoples, and migrants. Cultural equity ensures that sustainability is not only ecological, but also socially just and representative. 12.9 Overcoming cultural barriers. Not all cultural habits support sustainability. High-consumption lifestyles, car dependence, or wasteful norms can resist change. Overcoming barriers requires policy alignment, e.g., making driving less convenient than public transit. Community engagement that connects sustainability to local values. Role models and champions who demonstrate sustainable living. Transformation occurs when sustainability becomes desirable, aspirational, and culturally meaningful. 12.10 Conclusion. Sustainability is as much about people as it is about technology or infrastructure. Cultures of cooperation, stewardship, and sufficiency underpin long-term ecological balance. The next chapter explores the role of governance and policy frameworks, examining how institutions can enable or hinder sustainable urban futures. Chapter 13. Governance and Policy Frameworks. 13.1 The Central Role of Governance. Urban sustainability depends not only on design and technology, but on how decisions are made, who participates, and what policies guide development. Governance provides the rules, institutions, and accountability mechanisms that translate ideas into action. Without strong governance, even the most ambitious sustainability plans remain aspirations. 13.2 Multi-level governance. Cities are influenced by governance at multiple scales. Local governments manage zoning, waste, and transport. National governments set regulations, allocate funding, and negotiate international agreements. Regional and global bodies, e.g. the EU, UN, create frameworks that align cities with global sustainability goals. Effective urban planning requires vertical coordination across levels of government and horizontal collaboration between neighboring municipalities. 13.3 Policy Instruments for Urban Sustainability. Governments use a mix of regulatory, economic, and voluntary tools. Regulation, building codes, zoning laws, emission standards. Economic instruments, carbon pricing, congestion charges, subsidies for green tech. Voluntary initiatives, public-private partnerships, community-led sustainability projects. Informational tools, eco-labels, public campaigns, open data portals. A balanced mix ensures compliance while fostering innovation and citizen engagement. 13.4 Urban planning laws and zoning. Traditional zoning often separates land uses, leading to sprawl and car dependence. New governance approaches emphasize mixed-use zoning integrating housing, work, and leisure. Transit-oriented development, clustering growth around public transport. Green zoning, requiring green roofs, permeable surfaces, or biodiversity corridors. Legal frameworks must adapt to support flexibility, resilience, and inclusivity in planning. 13.5 Climate governance. Cities are frontline actors in climate policy. Tools include climate action plans aligned with the Paris Agreement, net zero targets for buildings, transport, and energy systems, resilient strategies addressing floods, heat waves, and disasters. Networks like C40 Cities and ICLEI amplify local climate action on the global stage. 13.6 Participatory governance. Inclusive governance ensures legitimacy and effectiveness. Mechanisms include citizen assemblies deliberating on climate or urban planning. Participatory budgeting, allowing communities to allocate funds. Digital platforms for crowdsourcing ideas and feedback. Participatory approaches foster trust, equity, and innovation, embedding sustainability in the democratic fabric of cities. 13.7 Policy challenges and barriers. Governance for sustainability faces multiple obstacles. Fragmented authority between municipal agencies. Short political cycles discouraging long-term planning. Lobbying and vested interests from industries resistant to change. Capacity gaps, especially in resource-constrained cities. Overcoming these barriers requires political will, institutional reform, and citizen pressure. 13.8 International frameworks. Global governance influences urban sustainability through the Paris Agreement, setting climate targets. The UN Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, particularly Goal 11, Sustainable Cities. The New Urban Agenda, Habitat 3, outlining global principles for urbanization. Regional frameworks, such as the EU's Green Deal and Asia-Pacific Smart City initiatives. These frameworks provide alignment, but must be localized to specific urban contexts. 13.9 Innovations in urban governance. Emerging models are reshaping governance. Polycentric governance, where multiple overlapping authorities coordinate flexibly. Experimental governance, using pilot projects to test new policies before scaling. Data-driven governance, integrating AI, sensors, and predictive analytics. Collaborative governance, engaging businesses, NGOs, and communities alongside government. These innovations create more adaptive, resilient systems. 13.10 Conclusion. Governance and policy are the backbone of sustainable urban planning. Without supportive frameworks, physical infrastructure and cultural shifts cannot scale or endure. The next chapter looks ahead to visions of future cities, exploring how emerging ideas and technologies might shape urban life by 2050 and beyond. Chapter 14, Future Visions of Sustainable Cities. 14.1 Looking Ahead. By mid-century, more than 2/3 of humanity will live in cities. The way urban areas evolve will determine the planet's environmental trajectory. Future visions of cities are not uniform. They range from high-tech smart eco-cities to regenerative communities rooted in local traditions. This diversity of possibilities reflects both human creativity and the challenges of aligning sustainability with culture, politics, and technology. 14.2 The Net Zero City. One vision is the carbon-neutral metropolis. Such cities run entirely on renewable energy, feature zero-emission transport networks dominated by public transit, cycling, and electric mobility. Enforce circular building practices, where materials are endlessly reused. Integrate nature at every scale, from urban forests to biodiversity corridors. Copenhagen, Helsinki, and other leaders are already pioneering pathways to this model, offering glimpses of a net-zero urban future. 14.3 The Regenerative City. Beyond doing less harm, some cities aim to actively heal ecosystems. Regenerative cities restore wetlands, rivers, and forests. Generate more renewable energy than they consume. Design buildings that clean the air, filter water, and support pollinators. Foster community well-being and cultural flourishing, not just efficiency. This vision reframes cities as positive ecological actors, coexisting symbiotically with nature. 14.4 The Smart and Connected City. Technological visions emphasize digital integration. Smart grids and IoT sensors optimize resource flows. AI manages traffic, waste, and energy with precision. Personalized mobility ensures seamless, shared transport. Blockchain ensures transparency in energy trading and land use. Yet critics warn that overly technocentric visions risk surveillance, inequality, and corporate dominance. Smartness must serve human and ecological goals, not just efficiency. 14.5 The Post-Growth and Sufficiency City. Some scholars and activists envision cities where success is not measured by GDP, but by well-being, equity, and ecological balance. Post-growth cities emphasize local economies and reduce material throughput. Prioritize public goods like education, health, and housing over consumerism. Design lifestyles centered on community, leisure, and low-carbon living. This model resonates with degrowth movements, challenging conventional notions of urban progress. 14.6 The Resilient City. As climate shocks intensify, resilience becomes central. Coastal cities build floating neighborhoods and amphibious architecture. Heat-resilient cities employ reflective surfaces, shading, and greenery. Decentralized energy and food systems ensure survival during crises. Social networks and governance systems enable rapid recovery. The resilient city accepts that uncertainty is inevitable and builds flexibility into its DNA. 14.7 Hybrid Futures. In reality, future cities may combine elements of all these visions. A smart regenerative city that uses AI to manage ecosystems. A resilient post-growth city that prioritizes equity and ecological sufficiency. A net-zero but high-tech metropolis, blending circularity with innovation. The diversity of pathways reflects the pluralism of human cultures and urban contexts. 14.8 Ethical and Political Considerations. Future visions raise ethical questions. Who benefits from smart technologies, the wealthy or the marginalized? Will regenerative design prioritize nature over affordability? How can cities avoid reproducing inequalities in new forms? Sustainability must be inclusive, democratic, and just, not just technologically advanced. 14.9 Imagining 2050. By 2050, sustainable cities might look like this. Streets are car-free, lined with trees and cycleways. Buildings are energy positive, producing solar power for their neighborhoods. Food is grown on rooftops, in vertical farms, and in peri-urban zones. Waste no longer exists. All materials circulate in closed loops. Public spaces thrive with art, culture, and civic life, reflecting diverse identities. Such futures are possible, but only with collective vision, governance, and action. 14.10 Conclusion. Future cities will not all look the same. Some will be net zero, others regenerative, others focused on resilience or sufficiency. The key is choice. The decisions made today will shape which pathways dominate tomorrow. The next and final chapter brings together the lessons of this book, outlining strategies for building the next generation of sustainable cities. Chapter 15. conclusion and pathways forward. 15.1 The Urban Century. The 21st century is the urban century. Cities already house more than half of the global population, and by 2050, that share will rise to nearly 70%. Urban areas consume over 2/3 of the world's energy and generate more than 70% of greenhouse gas emissions. The future of humanity is inseparable from the future of cities, and the sustainability of cities will determine the sustainability of the planet. 15.2 Lessons from the past. Urban planning has always evolved with human needs. From defensive medieval cities to industrial metropolises, urban forms have reflected their eras. The 20th century's car-centric growth left legacies of sprawl, pollution, and inequality. The past decades have shown that business as usual, urbanization, is untenable. The history of urban planning demonstrates that cities are malleable, adaptive, and capable of reinvention. 15.3 The Core Principles of Sustainable Cities. Throughout this book, recurring principles have emerged. Equity. Sustainability must be just, inclusive, and participatory. Resilience. Cities must withstand shocks while continuing to thrive. Circularity. Waste must be designed out and resources endlessly reused. Human-centered design. Cities should prioritize well-being, health, and social connection. Integration with nature. Urban systems must regenerate, not deplete ecosystems. These principles provide a compass for navigating diverse urban futures. 15.4 Pathways to Action. Achieving sustainable urban futures requires coordinated action on multiple fronts. Governance and policy. Align urban plans with climate and equity goals. Foster participatory governance, ensuring all voices are heard. Reform zoning and building laws to support compact green development. Technology and innovation. Invest in renewable energy, smart grids, and clean transport. Use AI and data responsibly to optimize resource use. Encourage experimentation and learning through pilot projects. Culture and behavior. Promote sustainable lifestyles through education, incentives, and public spaces. Celebrate cultural practices that support stewardship and sufficiency. Use art and storytelling to inspire collective visions of sustainable futures. Economy and business. Shift toward circular and local economic systems. Support green entrepreneurship and community enterprises. Measure success in well-being, not just GDP. 15.5 Challenges ahead. Obstacles remain significant. Political inertia and short-term interests. Economic inequality, leaving many excluded from sustainable solutions. Cultural resistance to changing lifestyles and habits. Climate risks, which grow more severe with delay. Yet history shows that crises can catalyze transformation. Urban sustainability is not a utopian dream, but a necessity for survival. 15.6 A shared responsibility. Sustainable cities cannot be built by governments alone. They require collaboration across sectors and scales. Citizens embracing sustainable choices. Businesses innovating for circular and inclusive economies. Planners, architects, and engineers reimagining urban systems. Global networks fostering cooperation and knowledge exchange. Sustainability is both a technical project and a cultural movement, one that demands creativity, solidarity, and courage. 15.7 Imagining the next generation of cities. The cities of the future can be green, walkable, and socially vibrant, powered by renewable energy and regenerative systems, diverse, inclusive, and equitable, offering opportunities for all, resilient to climate shocks, adaptive to uncertainty, and embedded in ecosystems. This vision is ambitious but achievable. It requires commitment today to ensure a livable tomorrow. 15.8 Final reflection. The future of sustainable urban planning is not predetermined. It will be shaped by the choices societies make, by the values they uphold, the policies they implement, and the imagination they cultivate. If the 20th century was defined by cities of steel, concrete, and consumption, the 21st century can be remembered as the era of regenerative, just, and thriving cities. The task is monumental, but the opportunity is greater, to build not only sustainable cities, but better cities, for people, for nature, and for generations to come.